What do you think could push an agricultural state in America to the brink? Drought, floods, or disease? No. What's crushing the heart of American agriculture? Are corn containers being rejected around the world? From Iowa to Illinois, farmers are living through an unprecedented crisis, silos full of corn contracts vanishing, fields being burned. And on the home front, a new law called the Big Beautiful Bill is making things even worse for them. The world is turning its back, the domestic system is tightening, and American farmers now bear the burden of taxes while struggling to survive. And the question is your state among the top 10 collapsing regions? And is your family's dinner still secure while everything around is shaking? Watch until the end of this video, because this is not just a story about farmers, it's a story about all Americans. Number 1, Iowa. There are things so fundamental people never imagined they could disappear. In Iowa, that's corn. Every harvest season, corn is collected, transported, exported. The whole state thrives on those tiny kernels, from ethanol, fuel, and livestock feed to bread candy and fuel for the local economy. But in July 2025, the unthinkable happened. Japan, one of America's oldest and most loyal partners, announced it would stop importing U.S. corn and sign long-term contracts with Canada instead. In late June, Washington introduced a series of new trade policies with high tariffs on imported agricultural products, including rice from Japan. The fragile balance that had kept U.S.-Japan relations stable was suddenly shattered. Japan had once yielded its domestic rice market in exchange for American corn, but when respect was replaced by pressure, that unspoken agreement vanished. When Japan sought a new partner, it didn't take long to find one. Canada, with its strict quality control system, clean, non-GMO products, was ready to step in. But the real reason wasn't just about corn. Earlier this year, Canadians launched a Buy Canadian movement, not just a consumer slogan, but a declaration of economic sovereignty. Amid tense relations with the US, they chose to stand on their own feet without dependence, without being led by unstable agreements. Japan, having made many concessions in past negotiations with the US, saw and valued that independence. They weren't just buying products, they were choosing a kind of partner calm stable and not want to turn others into bargaining chips. So what happened to Iowa? Within 3 weeks, over $1.2 billion worth of corn export contracts vanished. Ethanol plants shut down, silos, overflowed trucks turned back with nowhere to deliver. Corn couldn't be sold, but fertilizer and fuel bills still arrived regularly. Then came another blow, not from the world, but from within America itself. Congress didn't renew tax relief provisions for agriculture. According to the American Farm Bureau, each mid-sized farm in Iowa may face an additional $5,000 to $10,000 annually due to lost equipment depreciation, reduced investment deductions, and rising accounting costs. Some tried to hang on, many others had no choice left. And then the new law, bearing a loud and proud name, took effect. It drastically cut social welfare subsidies from crop insurance and medical aid to food support. To continue receiving assistance, farmers had to prove they were working, even if there was no market for what they produced. No planting meant no subsidies. Planting meant deeper losses. A vicious cycle locked tight with no way out. Many chose to abandon their land. Some burned their fields, not to renew the crops, but to save on machinery operation costs. Fields that once sowed hope were now left to grow wild because planting no longer made sense. And the most heartbreaking part, Iowans didn't collapse because they were incompetent. They collapsed because they were left behind at the very moment they most needed someone to stand beside them. Number 2, Illinois. In Illinois, corn still grows seasonally. Fields or green silos are full, but strangely, everything around them is falling silent. Factory lines halt, warehouses shut down, harvesters sit idle. The corn is still there. There's just no one left who needs it. Unlike Iowa, where contracts were torn up due to political tensions, the blow to Illinois came from another direction, quieter but colder. Europe said no to US corn because it's GMO. For years, American farmers, especially in the Midwest, have had virtually no alternative but to plant genetically modified strains. The seed supply system, farming model, production processes all assumed one thing: GMO is the standard. And once you're in the supply chain, you can't just switch tracks. They didn't reject the world, but the world rejected them. The European Union tightened import regulations, eliminating genetically modified corn varieties, not only out of health concerns, but because they've chosen a different path: natural foods, tight controls, and transparent origins. Varieties like Syngenta's BT11, popular in the US, no longer have a chance of reaching EU markets. Even for animal feed, they want no part of a risky farming system. And from there, everything began to collapse. In Decatur, the agricultural logistics hub of the state, ADM, a leading name in corn processing, announced it would cut around 700 jobs, from line engineers and warehouse workers to machinery operators. Machines stopped running, tanks didn't need cleaning, and there were no orders left to fulfill. At the same time, John Deere in Illinois was also forced to lay off staff as sales of harvester seeders and farm maintenance equipment plunged. When fewer people farm, fewer need machines. And when machines go idle, hundreds from technicians to drivers leave the line. Meanwhile, as Illinois struggles with GMO corn, Canada quietly adjusts its farming model, choosing non-GMO strains, increasing quality control, ensuring on-time deliveries. The world noticed and responded with contracts. Billions of dollars in corn exports have shifted course. No longer heading to the US, they now go through Canada to Europe, Japan, the Middle East. And Illinois, once America's industrial corn capital, now watches silently from the sidelines. The pain isn't just in numbers, it's in the intangibles. Plant engineers, once proud to create products that carried America to the world, now see their names pulled from shift rosters. Long-haul drivers around Springfield, who used to haul corn to 5 states weekly, now deliver groceries. Their income has dropped by up to 30%. Local kids lose access to extracurricular classes. The factory still stands, but its windows are dusty, the parking lot as empty as winter. Some might ask, what does this have to do with me? The answer lies in your daily meals. The price of animal feed has increased by $6.07 per ton, as the US now imports from Brazil and Ukraine to replace its own no longer eligible supply. As a result, pork, chicken, beef, milk, and even cornmeal prices have risen 8–12%. No one calls it inflation, but consumers are still paying more without knowing why. What's most bitter is this: local farmers know. They know the world is changing. They know GMO has been shut out of the global game. But to change seed varieties, farming models, invest in new equipment, they need more than an individual. They need policy. They need direction. They need research support. They need guidance. But as they wait, what they see in the news isn't agricultural investment. It's debates between the most powerful man and the richest man in America arguing whether to create a third political party, a political divorce with no clear ending. Meanwhile, the fields are waiting for fertilizer. Number 3, Arkansas. An email from Cairo to Little Rock containing only one line shipment temporarily postponed. Just one short notice, yet enough to halt the entire downstream operation. Unlike Iowa, where corn is affected by trade disputes, or Illinois, where GMO barriers exist, Arkansas is not entangled in any political crisis. But the paradox here is even clearer. American corn isn't selling not because of politics, but simply because it's too expensive and inconsistent in quality. USDA reports show that in early 2025, U.S. corn prices hovered around $4.80 per bushel, while Brazilian corn ranged only from $3 to $3.20. For importers in the Middle East, once favoring U.S. goods, that gap is too large, especially when coupled with inconsistency in quality between batches and complex inspection processes. In Arkansas, every operational system has felt this shift. The transshipment warehouse in Little Rock reported an inventory increase of over 25% compared to last year. Many shipments had to be held back due to inability to export, but holding them means storage and handling costs, and with humid weather, mold is no longer rare. Meanwhile, local feed production plants were forced to cut capacity by around 30% because input is stuck and output doesn't sell. Transportation routes were reduced. Drivers lost jobs. The Port of New Orleans saw fewer orders. Corn remains, but the supply chain is shrinking day by day. No one is at fault here. Farmers did what they've always done. Plants ran as usual, but the world has changed, and the domestic system hasn't kept up. No policy to encourage seed innovation. No infrastructure to support inspection. No flexible mechanism for Arkansas farmers to catch up with what the global market now demands. And then the inevitable happened when the US is no longer cheaper, cleaner, or more stable. Buyers will choose other countries. When a rejected shipment email becomes the first signal, the consequences spread rapidly. Factories pause, trucks idle, domestic input prices rise. Consumers pay more for meat, milk, eggs without knowing that their bill began with a corn batch rejected halfway across the globe. Arkansas used to be just a transfer station, a single link in the chain. But when that link breaks, it's no longer just a farmer's problem. It's a national question. If even a state like Arkansas is suffocating from unsold corn, who will be next? Number 4. Texas. Texas was once the state that never feared a labor shortage. Wide fields, large silos, the border just ahead. Goods flowed southward smoothly like seasons that needed no promise. But then one morning in June, the grain warehouse in Laredo was quieter than usual. No sound of reversing trucks. No one waiting for a shipment to cross the border. And no clear explanation, just that orders stopped coming, and the people were gone. Since early 2025, after changes to labor and immigration policies, field workers gradually disappeared. Some vanished silently. Others never returned out of fear. The ones who once cut corn-hauled sacks drove trucks are no longer there. Not because the season ended, but because this season America is no longer a place where they can make a living. At that very moment up north, Canada opened a different door. The TFWP program, long existing, was expanded. Clear contracts, clean housing, livable wages with insurance and legal protection. Someone once said not perfect but more decent, and people left the land they thought was a dream to choose a place that made fewer promises, but kept them. Thus, a paradox emerged. Even immigrant labor began leaving America to seek what they once believed they'd find here. What's left in Texas warehouses that can't fulfill orders, trucks without loaders, and customers like Mexico, even just across the border, can't wait forever in uncertainty. Mexico didn't officially reject, but they chose other partners. Canadian corn arrived on time in full volume with complete documentation. The people who produced it were treated with dignity. In a market that relies on stability that matters more than any marketing, the loss didn't come from a single delayed shipment. It came from trust that could no longer be maintained. Estimates suggest that white corn exports from Texas to Mexico dropped about 15% in Q2 2025. At the same time, imports from Canada rose 8%, not a loud replacement, but enough to puncture a once unshakable supply chain. Yet perhaps the most painful part isn't in the numbers. It lies in the quiet stories unfolding in rural Texas. Some families, 3 generations of corn growers, are now planning to leave. Some take seasonal work in Canada, others apply to immigrate permanently. They don't complain. They're simply doing what they used to advise others find a place with more future. It sounds bitter, but it makes sense. When even those who once saw this land as flesh and blood no longer want to stay, then perhaps America hasn't just lost a customer. It's gradually losing the very hands that once sowed, harvested, and believed in the dream that used to be real. Texas was once the gateway for goods to Latin America. Now the goods are stuck, and the people are leaving. The border remains open, but not for exports. Rather for someone to step out and never look back. You think we've hit the limit? Not yet. Because the 5th name will take you to a state that's quiet, but slowly sinking in silence like a yellow lamp before it fades. Number 5, Minnesota. A bag of corn that meets standards can still be rejected, not due to mold, not due to impurities, but simply because it's outdated. This summer, several shipments of corn in Minnesota were stuck in warehouses even though all had passed inspection and were properly packaged. A farmer in Winona had placed much hope in a 200-ton shipment to South Korea. The expected price was 30% higher than domestic enough to recoup after a long drought and soaring input costs. But in the end, the importer refused. Not because he farmed poorly, just because the corn variety he used no longer met new technical standards. It's something many hadn't considered, because Minnesota has long been a hub for multi-purpose corn for food feed bioenergy. People here are used to doing things right consistently and believing that's enough. But starting in 2024, importing countries like South Korea, Taiwan, and parts of China began tightening requirements. Corn must withstand drought, have more stable moisture content, resist natural toxins better, and offer easier traceability. While many countries proactively switch to new varieties, most American farmers still use old ones not out of unwillingness, but because they lack the means. Minnesota's agricultural extension programs have faced budget cuts since 2023, with priorities shifting to urban and high-tech areas. Updating seed varieties became a luxury for many small farms. Meanwhile, Canada introduced the Aurora DR variety designed specifically for climate change conditions, better fungus-resistant stable moisture, and a clear inspection system from seeding to shipping. In Q2 2025, Canadian corn gained 9% more market share in South Korea. In contrast, according to USDA Fast Sol US, corn saw a 13% increase in rejections or delayed clearance compared to the same period last year. These numbers aren't just statistics. They show a shifting position. The impact spreads further than we imagine. When corn can't be exported, feed producers must turn to more expensive sources. Forecasts from the Corn and Soybean Feed Association suggest poultry feed prices may rise by about 7% in Q3, and that means consumers will pay more for eggs, meat, corn oil, without knowing why. And perhaps because America led for too long, we forgot the market doesn't just choose the strongest country. It chooses the partner who knows how to adapt at the right time. Number 6, Louisiana. An unremarkable cornfield can still shake an entire supply chain just because it rained at the wrong time. This April, Louisiana experienced a streak of weather that farmers described as no rules left to trust. A month-long drought was suddenly replaced by relentless downpours. Before adaptation was possible, 2 consecutive storms hit just as the corn was nearing harvest. The storms flooded the soil, soaking unharvested kernels and increasing the risk of aflatoxin contamination, a fungus that has silently led to the rejection of many U.S. shipments by international partners. At the Port of New Orleans, a strategic export point for the entire South Central region corn containers, faced stricter inspection than ever. Many batches exceeded moisture thresholds. Some even surpassed the 2.1% total damage limit, higher than the national average. For markets like Southeast Asia or Europe, where moisture must be below 14% and integrity above 95%, such figures are enough to halt purchases or reroute orders elsewhere. What's notable is that Louisiana isn't among the states with the highest corn yields, but precisely because it serves as a logistics hub, a place for aggregation, processing, drying, and export, any disruption here causes a domino effect across the system. When the port falls behind schedule, factories get delayed, truck drivers wait on orders, technicians lose shifts, grain drying workers get their hours cut. No one speaks up, but everyone feels the impact, and it doesn't stop there. When Louisiana corn can't be exported, a feed mill in Baton Rouge must switch to more expensive alternatives. Poultry feed prices are expected to rise by about 7%, and as always, that cost ultimately falls back on the consumer. You may not notice immediately, but those small cents added to each carton of eggs, can of milk, or bottle of cooking oil are quietly telling the story of a flooded field in a state you might not even associate with corn. But among all this, the most painful part isn't the loss of a shipment. It's the helplessness when everything collapses and no one can do anything, because erratic climate is beyond control. But we could have been better prepared. Smart irrigation systems, anti-moisture storage tech, more precise crop forecasting maps, all these exist somewhere but weren't deployed quickly or broadly enough. That's what many farmers hoped for when they voted. They believed the most powerful man in the country could change the game, not with his hands, but through long-term policy. Yet season after season, disaster after disaster, things stayed the same. No explanations for preventive support systems, no significant reform in logistics. They simply watched the moldy corn bags get returned and wondered, did we expect too much? Number 7, North Dakota. It's a sad reality when a place once seen as a bright spot for corn exports thanks to stable climate and high yields is now increasingly associated with a phrase no farmer wants to hear: residue exceedance. Starting in early 2025, many corn exporters in the state have seen international partners from the Netherlands and Denmark to Singapore quietly cancel orders or shift to alternative sources. According to a mid-June report by the European Food Safety Authority (EFSA), about 18% of corn samples imported from North America showed signs of exceeding permissible levels of permethrin and chlorpyrifos, two chemicals still commonly used in U.S. agriculture. Among those samples from North Dakota made up a significant portion, as large-scale farming here often relies on chemical treatments to control early-season pests, especially in unpredictable weather years like 2025. What frustrates farmers is that they haven't broken any domestic rules. These substances are still legal in the US, still listed as approved, but internationally, especially in Europe and Asia, allowable limits have dropped dramatically, sometimes to just 0.01 parts per million. Exceeding that even slightly is enough to get an entire shipment rejected. And once a market finds reason to decline, they don't need a second chance to pivot to Canada or Eastern Europe, where such substances were phased out years ago. Worse, return shipments aren't just a concern for exporters. They quietly re-enter the domestic market, no announcements, no disclosures, but the consequences spread quickly. Processing plants buy corn at lower prices, citing uncertainty in raw material quality. Farmers lose international deals and get undercut at home. Some food companies in Minneapolis have proactively switched to organic corn or imports from Canada, accepting higher costs, just to shield their brand from simmering doubts. Then the saddest thing happens. Even consumers in North Dakota, the very place that grew the corn, begin to turn away. Not because they hate local products, but because when the media reports rejected due to residues without clear explanation, skepticism is a natural response. Some supermarkets in Fargo and Bismarck have reported slight drops in demand for local fresh and canned corn. Meanwhile, products labeled Canadian corn or certified organic are chosen more often, even if they cost 10-15% more. You can't blame them. If you had to choose between two items, one flagged in the news for chemical residues, the other stamped safe and transparent, what would you pick? Consumers don't want to take risks, especially when prices are rising, and every choice carries long-term health concerns. The paradox is this: while farmers still rise before dawn, follow every technical guideline, and strive for high yields to pay off last season's debt, their own communities, friends, neighbors, family start buying corn from elsewhere. No one says it aloud, but perhaps the sting of being doubted at home hurts more than being rejected abroad. And when American corn is no longer a symbol of global trust, the loss extends far beyond North Dakota. A name once worn with pride becomes a point of suspicion for a reason that once seemed so small. Number 8, Tennessee. In the middle of summer at a warehouse on the outskirts of Memphis, a container full of corn has sat idle for 2 days unable to depart. Not due to a broken truck or missing paperwork, but because the Japanese buyer has yet to confirm the electronic traceability code, a string of data showing where the corn was planted, when which variety, how long it was dried, and which checkpoints it passed. To consumers, corn is just corn, but to today's international markets, it's a product that needs a clear lineage like a detailed passport from field to port. And if a shipment can't prove that it will be delayed or even rejected, even if there's nothing wrong with its quality. Tennessee, though not a top corn-producing state, is a major agricultural transit hub. Thanks to its strategic location and logistics infrastructure, corn from across the central southern region is consolidated here before heading abroad. But because of that very role, Tennessee is among the first to feel the impact when the game changes. Since 2024, markets like the EU, Japan, and South Korea have required traceability according to GS1 standards, where all data must be digitized, crop variety, sowing date, chemical use, drying moisture, and container storage conditions. Meanwhile, many medium and small farms in Tennessee still rely on handwritten notes paper records or outdated Excel sheets. They don't oppose transparency, they simply haven't received enough support to keep up. Rather than blaming anyone or waiting for a miracle, now might be the right time to focus on practical, achievable solutions. Many countries have shown that digital transition doesn't have to start with high-end tech. Canada, one of the nations steadily gaining U.S. corn market share, offers free government-sponsored traceability software preloaded on low-cost mobile devices. Some co-ops in Europe even hire agricultural students as interns to help farmers with digital record-keeping during the season. In the U.S., if states like Tennessee could build a support network, not necessarily large, but effective and user-friendly, farmers wouldn't feel abandoned in the global transition. Simple apps to log crop diaries, QR encoding for each batch, or cloud storage systems tailored to small farms could be developed free or subsidized. The government has done similar things before with crop insurance and disease surveillance, so why not for traceability? Of course, without support, some farms will inevitably fall behind, lose orders, or retreat to selling domestically at lower prices. But Tennessee, with its special position and intermediary role, has the chance to become a testing ground for small-scale smart traceability models. A well-executed transition here wouldn't just help the state weather short-term crises, but could also pave the way for hundreds of farms across America. Number 9, Missouri. A container of corn departing from a Missouri port is worth around $200,000. Among that, quarantine inspection fees typically cost less than $500. But just a single fall armyworm egg, smaller than the tip of a needle if detected at the importing port, can result in the entire shipment being held re-inspected or outright rejected. It may sound excessive, but in 2025, this is the reality that many agricultural exporters in Missouri are facing. Since the beginning of Q2, major export markets like Japan, South Korea, and several European countries have simultaneously upgraded their quarantine inspection protocols, especially for products at risk of carrying plant pathogens. Amid the widespread outbreak of fall armyworms across North America, Missouri, with its humid, warm climate and a dense crop seasons, has become the region where this pest thrives most. It's no surprise that many buyers have started to grow wary. According to the USDA APHIS report from May 2025, about 14% of corn samples originating from Missouri showed signs of failing quarantine standards, from egg traces, shed skins, to surviving larvae. For markets that enforce a zero-tolerance policy, meaning no biological traces are acceptable, one small flaw can risk the entire shipment being rejected. Some small cooperatives have already started to pivot towards soybeans, livestock forage, or other crops with lower quarantine risks. But that also means lower income and a more uncertain future. And a state once praised for its ideal corn-growing climate is now struggling just to keep up simply because of microscopic signs too small to spot with the naked eye. We've spent years talking about yield, productivity, and competitiveness. And the final story might surprise you the most. Number 10, Florida. We often think cheap prices are an advantage. But in the world of agricultural exports, when the price hits rock bottom to the point that others grow cautious, it becomes a reason to turn away. That's what's happening with American corn in Florida, though not a major corn-growing state is now bearing the brunt. From ports like Jacksonville or Miami, thousands of tons of U.S. corn are shipped weekly to the Middle East, the Caribbean, and Africa. But this June, everything reversed. Several countries began tightening quotas, even outright rejecting U.S. corn, not due to quality, but because it's so cheap that it disrupts local markets. Kenya, Ghana, and Jamaica all voiced the same concern: if U.S. corn continues to flood in, local farmers won't be able to survive. The issue isn't with Florida, it originates from the entire system. With a record-breaking 2025 season, over 95 million acres planted and more than 15 billion bushels produced, the U.S. has too much corn to sell. Prices have dropped to just over $4 per bushel. That may sound good for exports, but to developing nations, it's a price that crushes farmers, a kind of competition they simply can't win no matter how hard they work. And so what once was an advantage, low prices, has become a burden. Florida is caught in the middle. Shipments can't leave, orders are delayed, packing plants have halted operations, drivers wait a week just for one trip. No one's speaking out loudly, but the logistics system is beginning to wobble, and people, whether in Miami or rural Ocala, can feel the impact in every cent of their weekly grocery bill. On international media, images of African farmers holding signs protesting cheap corn are spreading. They're not against America, they just want to protect their own farmland, something anyone who farms can understand, and perhaps that's worth reflecting on. While we take pride in strong exports and competitive pricing, have we forgotten that a cheap kernel of corn isn't just a number, but the lifeblood of an entire community across the ocean? Florida isn't losing because of quality, but because the world is beginning to ask how cheap is too cheap before it stops being fair. Do you see your state's name in this list? If not, don't exhale in relief just yet. Because when the entire corn industry, one of the pillars of American agriculture, is in peril, no state stands outside the storm. When the world turns away, when farmers stop planting, when warehouses stand empty, the effects will reach all the way to your dinner table and utility bill. This video does not promote division within the United States. All content is presented with the purpose of exploring, analyzing, and sparking discussion based on current events, sentiments, and social trends. We respect the U.S. Constitution and all federal regulations,